Jack Mercer's hands trembled slightly as he sat before the ancient terminal, its screen flickering to life. The station's power systems were damaged, but somehow the old machine still functioned, albeit in a way that made it feel like a forgotten relic of a long-gone era. The sound of the keyboard's keys clicking in the silence of the station felt unnervingly loud, but Jack ignored it. He had to focus. He had to understand what had happened here, what went wrong. The screen blinked a few times before displaying a series of encrypted files. Jack's heart raced. He knew this was it, the answers he had been looking for. The truth was buried here somewhere. He began to type rapidly, bypassing the outdated security protocols with ease, his fingers moving as though guided by instinct. His Marine training had taught him how to hack systems on the fly, and now that knowledge was coming in handy. The first file opened, and Jack's eyes widened as he read the words on the screen. The file was labeled Project Vanguard, classified, and the contents were startling. The project, as he had suspected, wasn't just about research or defense. It was about creating something far more dangerous, something deadly. The project's purpose was clear: to develop hybrids, a terrifying combination of human and Silurian DNA. The hybrids were designed to be the perfect soldiers, capable of blending in with human society and infiltrating any human colony. Jack leaned forward, his eyes glued to the screen as he scrolled through more data. The files detailed experiments, genetic manipulations, and training simulations. But there was something even darker lurking beneath the surface. As he read, he learned that the hybrids weren't just soldiers. They were weapons, created to infiltrate humanity, gain trust, and then turn on their creators. They were designed to wage war from the inside. A cold chill ran down Jack's spine as he continued reading. The Exhilarations, an alien race once thought to be allies of humanity, had secretly partnered with corrupt factions within Earth's government. Their goal wasn't just colonization, it was total subjugation. The Exhilarations had promised humanity power beyond measure, but in return, they had demanded something far worse: the creation of the hybrids. The hybrids were engineered to infiltrate, manipulate, and ultimately destroy humanity from within. Jack's breath quickened as he dug deeper into the files. The hybrids were not just enhanced with human strength and agility. They were also genetically altered to possess heightened intelligence and telepathic abilities. This made them not only physically unstoppable, but also mentally superior to anything humanity had ever seen. These soldiers could blend into human society, assume any identity, and execute covert operations with deadly precision. But that was not the worst part. As Jack read further, he learned that the hybrids had broken free. What was meant to be a secret weapon turned into a nightmare. The project had been deemed a failure because the hybrids began to act independently, no longer following orders. They rebelled, turning against the very people who had created them. Vanguard Station had been abandoned not because of a malfunction, but because it was a containment facility, designed to house the hybrids and keep them from spreading. The logs indicated that the hybrids had escaped the station months ago. The facility was now a graveyard, its systems barely operational, its corridors filled with the remnants of the Silurian-human partnership. But what had the hybrids been doing since their escape? Jack's mind raced. The answer was clear. The hybrids had been preparing for something. They were planning to invade, to take over. A sudden movement in the shadows outside the terminal caught Jack's attention. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The station was eerily quiet, yet there was a presence, an oppressive, watching presence. Jack turned his head, scanning the dimly lit room, but saw nothing. He told himself it was just his imagination, his nerves getting the best of him. He refocused on the screen. He needed to know more. The secrets he had uncovered were dangerous, and he had to piece together what was happening before it was too late. As Jack read the next section of logs, his eyes widened in disbelief. The hybrids weren't just a threat to Earth. They had already made contact with other alien races. The alliance with the Exhilarations was part of a larger plan, one that spanned across the stars. The hybrids were meant to be the vanguard, the first wave in an invasion that would eventually engulf the entire galaxy. The exhilarating had seen humanity as nothing more than a stepping stone, a tool to help them conquer other civilizations. The hybrids, though, had different plans. They didn't want to be tools. They wanted to be masters. Jack's stomach churned as he digested the weight of what he had uncovered. The hybrids were still out there, and they were not just a threat to Earth. They were a threat to the entire galaxy. The exhilarating had created a monster that they could no longer control, and now that monster was free. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed down the hallway, followed by the unmistakable sound of scraping claws against metal. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The hybrids were coming. His instincts kicked in, and he quickly shut down the terminal, wiping the data from the screen. He had learned enough. Too much. There was no time to waste. Jack stood up, his eyes darting around the room. The station's once pristine halls were now a labyrinth of darkness and decay, and he knew he had to move quickly. The hybrids were smart, and they were hunting him. The station's power was fluctuating, and the emergency alarms were beginning to sound. He was running out of time. As Jack made his way to the exit, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The shadows seemed to move with him, closing in as the darkness of Vanguard Station consumed everything in its path. Jack knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to make it out of this alone. The hybrids were no longer just a secret. They were a growing threat. And now, the only thing that mattered was survival. As the doors to the hallway opened, Jack stepped into the unknown, knowing that whatever he had uncovered in those logs was just the tip of the iceberg. The real nightmare was only beginning. Jack's heart hammered in his chest as he backed away from the terminal, his mind racing. The logs he had uncovered in the station's hidden archives painted a terrifying picture. Project Vanguard had been much more than a simple military experiment. It had been an alliance between humans and an alien race, the Exhilarating, designed to create the perfect hybrid soldier. But it wasn't just the military they had in mind. The project's true goal was far darker, far more dangerous. The Exhilarating had not come to Earth as allies. They had come to use humanity. And in return, they had gifted Earth with a terrifying weapon, the hybrids. Jack's mind struggled to process the magnitude of what he had uncovered. These genetically altered soldiers weren't just created to fight wars. They were designed to infiltrate human society. Their mission was to blend in, gain power, and eventually destroy humanity from within. The silent invasion. Jack couldn't believe what he was reading. These hybrids, half human, half Silurian, had been built to be unstoppable. Enhanced strength, speed, and intelligence, with the ability to communicate telepathically and manipulate minds. They were the ultimate soldiers, born for one purpose: destruction. His fingers hovered over the keys, his mind racing. How had this project gone so wrong? Why had Vanguard Station been abandoned? The station had clearly been a containment facility, a holding pen for the hybrids once the project went sideways. But it wasn't just the hybrids Jack had to worry about. The Exhilarating had no intention of abandoning the project. If the hybrids had escaped, it meant the invasion was already underway. And Earth was completely unprepared. As Jack scrolled deeper into the logs, he found more disturbing revelations. The hybrids had broken free from Vanguard Station months ago, far earlier than the project's creators had intended. But it didn't stop there. The hybrids had not only escaped, they had also reached out to other alien races. They weren't just a rogue weapon. They were the first wave of an invasion. The Exhilarating had planned to use humanity as a stepping stone, but the hybrids had their own plans. They didn't want to be tools. They wanted to rule. And the Exhilarating had lost control. The logs detailed communication between the hybrids and various alien factions. There was talk of alliance building, of creating a galactic empire, and of wiping out anything that stood in their way. Jack's stomach twisted as he realized what this meant. The hybrids were not some rogue experiment. They were the vanguard of a coming storm, and that storm would sweep across the galaxy. Jack's mind raced as he processed the implications. The hybrids were still out there. They were preparing for something far worse than Jack had ever imagined. The Exhilarations had promised humanity power, but in exchange, they had turned Earth into a breeding ground for their own destruction. And now, the hybrids were free, and nothing was going to stop them. Suddenly, the station's power systems flickered, plunging the room into a momentary darkness. Jack froze, his heart pounding. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he listened, straining to hear any sounds that might indicate movement. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of failing lights. Then, the unmistakable sound of scraping metal echoed from the hallway outside the terminal. Jack's breath caught in his throat. Something was coming. He quickly shut down the terminal, his mind racing. He had to move. He had to find out what was happening, and if possible, stop it before it was too late. He grabbed his gun, which had been lying on the table next to him, and checked the ammo. Only a few shots left. It wouldn't be enough, but it was all he had. He turned toward the door, his pulse racing as he tried to steady his breathing. The sound outside was getting closer, and Jack knew he didn't have much time. The hybrids were here. They had found him. As Jack moved cautiously through the station's corridors, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Every creak, every shift in the air, made him jump. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing in the distance, but there was no telling whether they were human or something else. The hallway stretched before him like a labyrinth of shadows, each turn holding the potential for danger. Then, as he reached a narrow junction, a figure appeared in the distance, a towering, muscular shape. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the creature stepped into the dim light. It wasn't human. Its skin was an unnatural shade of gray, almost metallic, and its eyes glowed with an eerie red light. The hybrid. Jack froze. His mind screamed at him to move, but his legs wouldn't respond. The hybrid was closer now, its steps slow and deliberate, as if savoring the hunt. The creature's lips curled into a grin, revealing sharp, predatory teeth. Jack's pulse quickened as he took a step back, his mind racing for a plan. How the hell was he going to survive this? The hybrid stopped a few feet away from Jack, studying him with its glowing eyes. For a moment, Jack's thoughts spun. The hybrid's grin widened, as though it could hear his racing thoughts. The creature reached a clawed hand toward Jack, its fingers elongating like sharp blades. Jack's instinct kicked in, and he drew his gun, firing. The shot rang out, echoing through the hollow station. The hybrid didn't flinch. Instead, it laughed, the sound low and chilling. "Is that all you have?" It sneered, its voice dripping with venom. It took another step forward, closer, until Jack could feel the heat of its body. The hybrid raised its hand, ready to strike. But just before the blow could land, a loud crash shook the entire station, and the hybrid turned its head, its glowing eyes narrowing. Something else was happening, something far worse. Jack didn't wait. He turned and sprinted down the corridor, his footsteps pounding in the silence as he ran for his life. The hybrid's screech echoed behind him, and Jack knew it was only a matter of time before more of them came. The station was a tomb, and he was trapped inside with the monsters that had once been humanity's creation. As Jack sprinted through the station's dark hallways, the weight of the logs he had uncovered hung heavily in his mind. The hybrids weren't just soldiers. They were a contingent force in a galactic war. A war Jack had no idea how to fight. The truth was clear now. The hybrids were coming for everything, and it was up to him to stop them. Jack's lungs burned as he ran down the darkened hallways of Vanguard Station. His footsteps echoed through the abandoned corridors, and every sound seemed to amplify in the eerie silence that surrounded him. The station, once a high-tech marvel, had fallen into decay, its systems on the brink of collapse. The lights flickered erratically above him, casting long, unsettling shadows against the walls. The sense of being watched, of something lurking just beyond his reach, grew stronger with every passing second. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat, thudding like a drum. Every part of him screamed to keep running. He didn't know how much longer he could hold out. The hybrids were still hunting him. He had fired at one earlier, but it hadn't even flinched. He could still hear the chilling laughter echoing in his mind. It was as if the creature knew everything. His thoughts, his fear, his next move. It was a feeling Jack had never experienced before, not even in the most intense firefights. The hybrids were unlike anything he'd ever faced. He turned a corner sharply, finding himself in an old storage bay. The door slid shut behind him with a metallic hiss, and for a brief moment, Jack was alone. His breath came in ragged gasps as he tried to steady himself. Focus. Stay focused. He couldn't afford to panic. There was too much at stake. Jack's hand trembled slightly as he checked his weapon again. He was running out of ammunition, and he had no idea how many more hybrids were still lurking in the station. The logs had made one thing clear: the hybrids were not only incredibly dangerous, but they were also relentless. Once they set their sights on something, there was no stopping them. He couldn't outrun them forever. The only option left was to find a way to fight back. His eyes scanned the storage bay, looking for anything useful. The room was filled with crates and discarded equipment, most of it ancient and rusted. But in the corner, something caught his eye. It was a laser cutter, probably left behind by the original crew. Jack grabbed it, testing the weight. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. It was better than nothing. Just as he slung the cutter over his shoulder, the air around him grew suddenly cold. Jack froze, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. His instincts screamed at him to run again, but it was too late. The shadows in the far corner of the storage bay shifted, and a pair of glowing red eyes appeared. Then another, and another. Jack turned slowly, dread creeping up his spine. The hybrids had found him. They were closing in from all sides. The one in front of him stepped forward first, its massive form blocking the exit. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. The creature's skin was a sickly gray, its features sharp and distorted, and its mouth curled into a cruel smile. It was the same hybrid he had encountered earlier. Jack's heart raced as he stepped back, pressing himself against the cold metal wall of the bay. The hybrid chuckled darkly, its voice dripping with malice. "You're not going anywhere, human," it taunted, its voice echoing through the room. "The station belongs to us now. And you are our plaything." Jack's grip tightened around the laser cutter. He could feel the cold sweat on his forehead as his mind raced. The room was closing in on him, the hybrids circling like predators preparing for the kill. There was nowhere to run. But then, something in the back of his mind clicked. He remembered the logs. He remembered what he had read about the hybrids' ability to adapt, to change and evolve based on the threats they encountered. They were intelligent, yes, but they were also creatures of instinct. If Jack could use that to his advantage, if he could trick them somehow, buy himself some time, maybe, just maybe, he could survive. The hybrid in front of him took a step forward, its massive clawed hands reaching out to grab him. Jack's instincts kicked in, and he lunged to the side, barely dodging the hybrid's grasp. The hybrid growled in frustration, its glowing eyes narrowing in fury. As Jack scrambled to his feet, he knew he had only one shot at this. The storage bay was lined with old power conduits, and Jack had seen earlier that several were still sparking with live electricity. If he could somehow use the environment against them, set up a trap, he might stand a chance. The hybrid lunged at him again, but this time Jack was ready. He ran toward the nearest conduit, drawing the hybrid's attention. It followed, but Jack was quick. He knew the hybrid's movements. He could predict them. As the hybrid took a swipe at him, Jack dodged once more, leading it straight into the exposed power conduit. The moment the hybrid touched it, sparks flew, and the creature let out a shrill scream as electricity coursed through its body. It stumbled back, writhing in pain, and Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed the laser cutter, aiming it at the hybrid's weak spot, its neck. The weapon hummed to life with a bright blue light, and Jack fired. The beam sliced through the creature's skin with terrifying precision, and the hybrid dropped to the floor with a heavy thud, dead. But Jack didn't have time to celebrate. The other hybrids were still closing in. The smell of burning flesh and ozone filled the air as the remaining creatures advanced. The first one might have been down, but Jack had only bought himself a moment. He could hear more footsteps echoing from the hallway outside, and he knew that there would be no escaping the station without a plan. He had to find a way out. There was only one thing left to do. Jack couldn't take on every hybrid in the station. His only chance was to destroy the Vanguard station, to eliminate the source of the threat once and for all. The main reactor was deep within the station, and if he could get there, he could set off a chain reaction powerful enough to wipe out everything. The hybrids, the Silurians' research, all of it. Jack turned toward the exit of the storage bay, his resolve hardening. He might not survive this. He might never make it off the station alive. But one thing was certain. He was not going down without a fight. The hybrids had underestimated him. Now, it was time for Jack Mercer to turn the tables. As he sprinted down the hallway, the station's alarms blared loudly in his ears, warning him of the imminent danger. But Jack didn't care. He had a mission. The countdown had begun. The end was coming, and Jack was ready to face it head-on. The station's loud alarm echoed in the metallic halls, a constant, shrill reminder of the chaos unfolding around Jack. His heart raced as his boots pounded against the cold, grated floor. Vanguard Station, once a symbol of human advancement, now felt like a tomb, an abandoned, decaying monument to humanity's hubris. It was hard to believe this place had once been bustling with life, filled with scientists, engineers, and military personnel. Now, it was home to nightmares, and Jack was running out of time. His plan was risky, desperate, but it was the only option left. Jack had seen the maps of Vanguard Station's main reactor, and it wasn't far. If he could reach it and set off a chain reaction, the explosion would be enough to obliterate the station and everything in it. The hybrids, the Silurian project, the dark secrets lurking within these walls, they would all be erased. The path to the reactor was treacherous, though. Jack had no illusions about that. The hybrids were hunting him, and they were relentless. The first one had almost killed him. The second had nearly torn him apart with its monstrous strength. And now he was heading straight into their den, into the heart of Vanguard Station. As he sprinted through the twisting corridors, Jack's mind raced with possibilities. He could hear the scratching and scuttling of the hybrids' claws, the echo of their footsteps growing louder with every passing second. They were closing in, and they were smart. They were learning from each encounter, adapting to his moves. He knew they wouldn't be as easy to outsmart this time. Jack skidded to a halt at an intersection, his breath coming in sharp gasps. He quickly checked his weapons again. The laser cutter was nearly depleted, but the pistol he'd taken from the security locker had more ammo. Still, he knew that wasn't going to be enough to stop the hybrids. He needed speed, cleverness. He needed to be the one to control the fight. His eyes flicked up toward the ceiling, then down to the floor, scanning for any weaknesses in the station's structure that might give him an advantage. The overhead lights flickered again, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to stretch like claws across the walls. Jack's gaze settled on a small service hatch beside the wall. It was just big enough for him to crawl through. Without a second thought, Jack dove toward the hatch. He fumbled with the rusted door, gritting his teeth as the metal scraped painfully against his fingers. The noise felt deafening in the quiet of the station, but there was no choice. He had to be fast. With a final desperate push, the hatch opened. Jack slipped inside, his body crammed into the tight space. The crawl space was dark, with only a few faint red emergency lights casting a dim glow. As he crawled, his mind raced. The reactor was just ahead, But it wasn't the hybrids he feared now. It was the timing. Once the countdown began, there would be no turning back. The station would be reduced to rubble. And Jack, he would be caught in the explosion. His hand grazed the wall as he pulled himself forward. The hatch closed behind him, leaving him in total darkness. He pushed forward, trying to ignore the creaks and groans of the station. Vanguard Station was dying. It was barely holding itself together. And Jack, he was running out of time. A few minutes later, he emerged from the crawl space into a small maintenance room. His eyes scanned the area quickly, looking for any signs of the hybrids. But it was empty, save for a few scattered tools and old crates. He didn't waste time. The reactor was just beyond this room. Jack moved swiftly but cautiously through the maintenance corridors, taking note of the wiring and control panels along the walls. The hybrid's claws scraped somewhere in the distance. He could hear them, feel them getting closer. They were getting smarter. As he approached the main reactor core, a sudden realization hit him. The hybrids were too quiet. Jack had expected them to be right behind him, close enough to strike, but the silence was almost deafening. Had they gotten wise to his plan? Were they laying a trap? He reached the final door to the reactor's control room, his pulse racing. He checked the door's console. It was locked, but the override code was still in the system. He punched in the code, and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the reactor room was filled with the low hum of the core's power. A massive, glowing sphere in the center of the room pulsed with energy. It was both beautiful and terrifying, like something alive, something that could destroy everything with the flick of a switch. Jack knew he didn't have much time. He needed to set the reactor to overload and get out. Fast. But as he moved toward the control panel, a sound from behind him froze him in place. The heavy footfalls of the hybrids filled the air. Jack turned slowly, his heart racing. The room was bathed in dim light, and standing in the doorway were at least 3 more hybrids, their glowing red eyes fixated on him. Their mouths curled into twisted, predatory smiles. Jack's hand instinctively gripped the pistol in his belt, but as he raised it, the hybrid in the front let out a chilling laugh. "You think you can stop us?" It hissed, its voice deep and menacing. "We were made for this. This station belongs to us now." The others in the back stepped forward, their claws glinting in the light, ready to strike. Jack's mind screamed for him to run. But there was nowhere to go. The reactor was behind him, and the hybrids were closing in, blocking any escape route. They knew what he was planning. They had to. They'd been watching him, waiting for this moment. Without thinking, Jack pressed a button on the control panel. The overload sequence began. He could hear the hum of the reactor intensifying, feel the vibrations beneath his feet. The countdown had started. The hybrids froze, staring at him with growing disbelief. For a moment, there was an eerie silence. Then the hybrid in the front snarled, "You fool! You really think you can destroy us?" Jack's pulse quickened as he backed toward the reactor's core. His mind raced. The explosion would tear through the station in minutes. He had no time left. He had to make a choice. With no other options, Jack turned and bolted toward the emergency exit. The only way out. The hybrids lunged after him, but Jack was already moving, sprinting through the halls. His legs burned, his breath ragged, but he could hear the countdown blaring in his ear.